Thank you for coming. It's quite impressive, isn't it? We can't let this moment go by this morning without thanking you all for your service. But I also wanted to thank one gentleman who is not here today. Not only has the Metro West Regional Transit Authority created opportunities for people in the Metro West area by providing transportation for people all around the Metro West area. This impressive facility and even more impressive statue would not have happened without the efforts of one individual who unfortunately could not join us here today. But he is my friend, your friend, and all of Metro West's friend, and that's Mr. Ed Carr. Mr. Carr is an American hero. He served in Vietnam, and this was his dream. And so we can honor Mr. Carr today with a round of applause. It would mean a lot. I don't want to forget the other hardworking members of the Metro West Regional Transit Authority staff that are here. Our Deputy Administrator, Eva Williams, has stood side by side with Mr. Carr over the years and made this possible. Pat Moynihan, the Hartwell brothers, Jerry and Danny, have put a lot of work into this ceremony today, so I would ask that you acknowledge them as well. Thank you. And at this time, I would like to call up the Framingham Fire Department for the presentation of the colors.
Great God of the universe, as we stepped into this treasured memorial site, we may have read the words written more than 2,000 years ago by a man named Cicero. Poor is the nation that has no heroes, but poor is the nation that, having heroes, fails to remember them and honor them. We are here as a testament to the truth that our great nation does remember its heroes. And today we recall the over 58,000 who were called to make the ultimate sacrifice as a result of the Vietnam War. We especially remember the 61 whose names are inscribed on the 2 granite monoliths to my left, and who came from the Metro West region. As we look upon the bronze image of a Vietnam veteran dressed and prepared for combat, I am called to the Minuteman statue in Buckminster Square, a reminder of those who stood ready to defend our country and defend the freedoms we enjoy. Our men and women in Nam fought a war against an enemy of freedom, as we do today, as communism still rears its ugly head on foreign lands. Today we honor the living as well as hold the cherished memory of the dead. Today we remember by this memorial site upon which we stand. Great God, help us to further resolve to welcome home our veterans and support them in their time of need. We pray for our hospitalized veterans and those struggling with post-traumatic stress disorder and brain trauma. Let us never forget. Today we do remember. Amen.
Another person who made this monument and this memorial park, taking it from a vision to a reality. And it cannot be forgotten that we have to honor her service as well for all of Metro West, and that's Senate President Karen Spilka. She unfortunately was not able to join us here today, but on behalf of the Senate President, I would like you to welcome Karen Edelman Foster with a few words.
Thank you so much, John, and thank you all for being here. It's an incredible honor to represent Senate President Karen Spilka today in such an august crowd from all over Metro West. I see Mayor Sisitsky here, which is always an honor to be in the same area with him, and so many others from all over Metro West. President Spilka loves veterans, worked so hard to make this memorial happen, and is incredibly dedicated to the memory of all those who have served, those who lost their lives, those who were injured in both visible and in invisible ways, the families of those who served, and those who just plain served. They were called, they responded, and they and their families have done such a boon for this country over the many years. Vietnam, in particular, was one of the more memorable fights of all of our lives. Not a straightforward one for many people, but boy, everybody who went, whether they served behind a desk or served on the front lines, gave of themselves for us. And I don't think we could possibly be more grateful or grateful for this memory, this memorial. So thank you so much, Jim, and thank you, MWRTA, and thank you everybody who's come and who is honoring the service of so many so very well. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Now for a special treat. My friend, Marine Corps Chair John MacGillivary.
Thank you, John. When they asked me to come here and speak, they told me I had 3 minutes. And anyone who knows me knows I can't even say hello in 3 minutes. So in any event, there will be a lot of talk about Vietnam, what transpired in Vietnam, the care for vets afterwards. What I want to focus on today is what Vietnam veterans have done since they got out of the military. Many of them have come back and they've led outstanding lives. They've raised families, they've had careers, they've gone to college, they've done a lot. And they did that with a lot of things going against them. A lot of vets came back from Vietnam and they were not well received by their country or by their fellow countrymen. The VA providing care for the vets, it wasn't the best. A lot of the doctors back then were foreign doctors. They had trouble speaking English, let alone understanding veterans. GI Bill to go to college, it was next to nothing. So with that in mind, a lot has been done, and the veterans today still need more care, but they are getting so much better care than the Vietnam vets have gotten, and they've gotten it because of people have learned from that. So, having said all that, I want to thank everyone who's here. I particularly want to thank the veteran service officers. They're doing outstanding work. And also Charlie Sisitsky in the city of Framingham. So thank you very much. I'm going to hand this back to John. Yeah, I know.
And for another special treat, I want to call up to the podium U.S. Army veteran Nick Paganella.
Over 400 years ago, 4 centuries, the Bay Colony formed a militia to protect the colony. And the Vietnam veterans who served was in that legacy also. Militia was formed, as I said, to protect the colony. And that small militia evolved into the military services and branches that we have now, 6 of them. At Commandant Lexington, where it all happened, right here in Massachusetts. Commandant Lexington, the Argonne Forest, Bellevue, Normandy, Corregidor, Korea, Vietnam. The torch was passed, and Vietnam veterans took the torch, served, protected the colony. Their legacy, as well as all who served, are to be commended, and I salute you. I salute you. But I will not forget the ordinary citizen, the family members who endured, while many of them served in far-off lands. We're all Americans. We love our country. We love our flag. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you, Nick. Very nice. We're also very honored to have our featured speaker today, National Senior Vice Commandant Warren Griffin. And before I call Warren up, Warren also, with John MacGillivary, was also very influential of making this monument go from a dream to a reality. So a round of applause for our speaker, Warren Griffin.
I want to thank all of the first responders here today. I want to thank our audience for taking the time out of their day to come and pay tribute to our Vietnam veterans. Especially want to thank the MWRTA for taking this and setting up this whole ceremony for us. Our nation became involved in the plight of the people of South Vietnam during the Eisenhower administration. This is significant because it was Eisenhower who oversaw the operation of the men and women of World War II in Europe. These were the heroes of the greatest generation. These were the men and women who were our parents. We had grown up listening to the stories of their exploits. We read their books. We watched their movies of triumphant battles, Guadalcanal, The Great Escape, The Longest Day, Battle Cry, The Bridge over the River Kwai, To Hell and Back, The Halls of Montezuma, The Desert Fox, Flying Leathernecks, From Here to Eternity, Away All Boats, and many others. The small screen in black and white featured Combat with Vic Morrow, 12 O'Clock High, McHale's Navy, Victory at Sea, Hogan's Heroes, The Rat Patrol, and again, many, many others. We were a generation who idolized those who came before us. We would look to grow upon them just as like they had exemplified for us. They were our heroes. We grew up toasting our president with a glass of milk with Big Brother Bob Emery. In schools, we began each day with the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a prayer. Teachers were the authority in school, and were to be respected and not questioned. It was a much simpler time. Our involvement in Vietnam grew as our own President Kennedy took office. We were going to support the South Vietnamese ARVN Army with advisors. Eventually, we could not leave these advisors out in the field without proper support. Those sent to provide the support needed protection. It was always better to take out the enemy before they attacked you. Thus began the Vietnam War. Our political leaders agreed to commit our military forces to stop the spread of communism in Southeast Asia, the domino theory. It was a mission that Americans, for the most part, felt we could easily accomplish as the world's leader in freedom and democracy. Beginning in 1965, America heavily escalated the number of troops committed to the war in Vietnam. The American troops would become very proficient in fighting both a conventional North Vietnamese army and the guerrillas fighting the Vietnamese communists. The enemy was a very good fighting force dedicated to their cause. A very good fighting force, but not superior to the American military. During all the years of our war in South Vietnam, the American units did not lose any of their compounds to the enemy. The year 1968 is the year America changed. As the year 1929 is the measuring stick by which the greatest generation begins to face the Great Depression, 1968 is the year America began to question itself. In 1963 was the year that Camelot was lost with the assassination of President Kennedy. We all felt the loss, but we carried on. January of 1968 began the Tet Offensives by the combined forces of the NVA and the VC in an all-out assault on the U.S. bases in Vietnam. The battles of Hue, Phu Bai, Quai Son, Saigon, and others became chapters in our history books. They were difficult, bloody battles and left many dead on both sides. This is a historic fact that gets lost in many of the revisionist history. The battles were horrific, but we were victorious. They were the young men fighting to the death, not to let his brother warriors down, and he didn't. North Vietnamese knew that they were not going to win the military battles, but they were trying to win the battle of the will and commitment of the American public. 1968, America was being torn asunder at home. We were no longer accepting authority. As a matter of fact, we became very dismissive of authority. Trust no one over 30. Those who took charge of America were gunned down. First Martin Luther King Jr., then Robert Kennedy. President Johnson became lost in the wave of protest against the war and refused to run for re-election. Because of restraints placed upon our military leaders, the war in Vietnam dragged on and on. Political leaders who were responsible for overseeing the military began to try to appease those against the war at home to the detriment of those actually fighting in Vietnam. Wars are not for the weak of heart. If you're going to commit to a war, you have no choice but to go all in. With the nation becoming disenchanted with the war in Vietnam that keeps going on and on, people began to misguidedly disrespect the warriors. This is one of the disgraceful periods in our great nation's history. Who were these warriors? 2.6 million served in Vietnam. Of those, 1 to 1.6 million were in combat. The first American to die in Vietnam was James Davis in 1958. Just under 60,000 Americans were killed in Vietnam. 61% of those souls were under 21. Of our generation, almost 10% served in the military. This war touched home for many. Some misconceptions attribute the Vietnam veterans. Most of those who served in Vietnam were drafted into our service for our country. No, 2/3 were volunteers in Vietnam. World War II veterans saw more combat than those who fought in Vietnam. Those who fought in the South Pacific saw 40 days of combat. In 1 year, the average infantryman in Vietnam saw 240 days of combat with the mobility of helicopters. Amputations or crippling wounds to the lower extremities were 300% higher than World War II and 70% higher than Korea. Minority casualties were higher than those of whites. No, 12% were minorities, which is the same percentage as the general population. Due to the Hollywood portrayals of the war, people had the misconception that the Vietnam veteran was a drug-addicted, suicidal baby killer who could not adjust to society. In fact, drug use was no more prevalent among Vietnam veterans than the general population of the same age group. The unemployment rate of the Vietnam veteran was lower than the non-veteran of the same age group, and personal income was 18% higher than non-veterans of the same age group. When we came home, there was a major problem with the Veterans Administration and its treatment of the new veterans. Young men and women who realized they were not the same person they were as when they left for the service had an uphill battle to have the VA acknowledge that PTSD is a real disorder. It had been a disorder with the first armies of the ancient world who fought in their battles. It was the Vietnam veterans, through diligence and tenacity, who forced the medical community to recognize the psychological illness is real and disabling. Another major battle was fought by the Vietnam veterans was against corporate America. Agent Orange, produced by our major chemical companies as a defoliant used in Vietnam, was a medical pariah to those exposed to it in Vietnam. These corporate chemists had to know what damage it would do to the human body. They fought and fought against the young servicemen and women who knew what they were living with. In 1991, the government finally recognized Agent Orange as a disabling chemical and allowed the VA to acknowledge veterans' claims as such. The Vietnam veteran had spent years of effort and money to win yet another battle. Unfortunately, few Vietnam veterans became actively involved in politics. The reason is simple. There was an overwhelming sense of abandonment by the system. This was an unfortunate set of circumstances. The Vietnam veterans' voice was not part of the system, which was in great part determining their future destinies. The Vietnam veteran moved on with his life, not looking for help, but with the learned behavior of, I can do this. I faced bigger problems than this. We fought a great fight, just not a great war. The Commonwealth of Massachusetts did its best, opening up the state college system to the Vietnam veterans at no cost. Today's returning veterans have a GI Bill beginning with the Webb Bill, very similar to that given to the World War II veterans, thanks to Senator James Webb of Virginia. Senator Webb knew of the injustices to the Vietnam veterans in this regard, as he served as a Marine infantry officer in Vietnam. Those not looking to go to college, but instead wanting to serve the public, looked to entering the civil service sector. The civil service system gave veterans absolute preference on civil service exam lists. Take the exam for the police, disabled veterans go to the top of the list, then the veterans, then the general population. This worked out well for the World War II and Korean veterans. Then came the Vietnam veterans. Well, we have to modify this system. If we give those veterans an advantage, we don't want to take them to have the jobs. When we, the Vietnam veterans, went to World War II veterans, who were the power brokers at the time, and asked for support, well, the "I've got mine, but I really can't help you" agenda came out very strongly. Today, if we want to help the OEF, OIF, Afghanistan veterans adjust to the civilian world, restore absolute veterans preference for them, they are less than 1% of the population, and it will not disrupt the civil service system with an overabundance of those veterans. Of the two other Marines in Massachusetts who I went over to Vietnam with, John Champion returned and graduated from Suffolk University and became a CPA. Jeremiah Higgins married, lost his wife to cancer after delivering 5 girls into this world. He carried on, became a lieutenant in the fire department, and as he says, "I must have done something right. All 5 girls graduated from college." He was able to conquer all his battles. My partner in Vietnam, Steve Fear, was from Brooklyn. He returned home, went to school, became an engineer for nuclear subs. I was able to graduate from Framingham State with an MBA, BA, teach in Boston until my retirement a number of years ago. We were not a group of returning veterans who became a plague on society. Quite the contrary. We served our country proudly. We came home and helped to build a better America for our children and our children's children. We can hold our heads high and deserve the same respect as those veterans who preceded us. For my fellow veterans, I want to thank you for recognizing our blood, sweat, and tears many years ago after we left on that jet plane and returned to the world and hopefully made a difference. Welcome home, and thank you for your service.
Wonderful presentation. Thank you, Warren. Honored to have you here today. Before everybody goes home today, I ask of one thing. Please observe these 2 monuments. Come up and read the names. These are the 61 individuals from the Metro West area who paid the ultimate sacrifice for us to be here today and defended our freedom. Look at the names. You might know a name or 2. I encourage you to do that. And with that I ask now that we bow our heads with a moment of silence to honor the fallen. Thank you. And to honor all veterans, Charlie will now perform taps. And now to perform the benediction, Chaplain Robert Anspach again.
Please stand. Uncover. We have gathered here to honor and show our respect for our Vietnam veterans. On this site, there stands a POW MIA flag, a constant reminder that there are still 1,241 POWs, and for many families, there has never been a closure. The flagpole is dedicated to Lance Corporal John Nealon. Flagpole at Marion High School was dedicated to him by the class of '67. John was a graduate of Marion High School and killed in action in 1967. Men and women came home to a nation divided. Anti-war sentiment rallied against our war-torn veterans 48 years. After the war, there are still hospitalized veterans and veterans suffering from various wounds of war. Today we honor our Vietnam veterans with gratitude, and we say what many may never have heard. Thank you for your service, and welcome home.
Thank you, Bob. And now, we will ask the Framingham Fire Department to retire the colors.
Light would fall.